Hey everyone, welcome to this Sunday morning's video. I hope that your week is going well. I hope you have had a great weekend celebrating the 4th of July and you've been able to have a good time with family, with friends, and that just things are going well. So this morning we are going to be continuing our series in the book of Daniel, Change and Consistency. And so in our last lesson, we looked at how to handle new seasons of our lives and how we should remain faithful to God throughout them. And we looked at Daniel chapter 1 to really go through that. And there were 3 major steps that we can take as we're entering new seasons in order to be able to better handle them. And so today we're going to be kind of continuing along with that. And so within each season of our lives, there are going to be a variety of different challenges that we must face. So yes, you have like your big chapter of life of like college or this school year or this relationship. But within that bigger chapter are all of these smaller individual challenges that we have to face. And some challenges may be daily. There may be some that span a little bit longer time, but there's going to be a lot of challenges in our lives. It's inevitable that we're going to face a variety of them, of different magnitudes and all that. So today we're going to be looking at more specifically how we can handle individual challenges and how the steps that we can take in order to really conquer them and how we can take them on in our day-to-day lives. And so in order to do that, we're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 2. Again, the entire chapter, to see how Daniel faced a particular problem that was thrown his way, and to really help us see how it is that we can better handle the challenges that we may come across in our daily lives. So with that, go ahead and grab your Bibles, and let's turn to Daniel chapter 2 and see what's going on. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." Once more they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king answered, "I am certain that you are trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologers answered the king, "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans." This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. So in these verses, we're really presented with the problem that Daniel is going to have to face. So King Nebuchadnezzar has been given this dream, and it really disturbed him, and he wants it interpreted. However, no one can interpret it, because on top of him wanting it interpreted, he wants the person who interprets it to tell him what the dream is, as a way of proving like, hey, I've been given the knowledge to be able to interpret this dream, because I also know what this dream was, even though you haven't told me. And so, with all of that, even taking it a step further, on top of that, King Nebuchadnezzar is threatening to kill anyone who incorrectly interprets the dream or who cannot interpret it. And then things escalate even more when it is decided that it is impossible for anyone on earth to interpret the dreams. All the magicians and people who worship other gods and all that, they decide like, oh, no one can do it, which is false because we know that God can do it. But they don't worship God. They worship all these other little gods. But since they declare that, King Nebuchadnezzar decides that he's just going to have all the wise men and prophets and magicians and astrologers and all that stuff killed. And this includes Daniel, which is super stressful considering Daniel wasn't even there when all of this was going down. And so they're just going out looking for Daniel and Daniel's friends to kill them, but they weren't even there. And so there's this really big problem that's like a life or death situation that Daniel's going to have to face. So what is he going to do? How is Daniel going to face this challenge? Well, if we keep reading, we will see exactly how it is that he handles this challenge. Let's take a look. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree?" Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went in to the king and asked for time, so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, "Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him." Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, "I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means." The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he is asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation, and that you may understand what went through your mind." So in these verses, we really see a lot of things that Daniel does in response to the problem at hand, in response to, King Nebuchadnezzar wanting to kill all of them because no one can interpret his dream. So the first thing that we see that Daniel does is that he responds in a calm, cool, and collected manner. We see in verse 14, it says that Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He didn't freak out. He didn't blow up. He just took a deep breath and was calm. And he asks for clarity. He asks the guard why this death sentence has been going around. And he allows the guard to explain to him what's going on. So instead of jumping into some big reaction, instead of blowing up or freaking out or running away or getting mad or anything like that, Daniel just takes a deep breath and he seeks out clarity on the situation. He wants all the information on what's going on before he then decides to respond to the challenge at hand. And then the second thing that we see is that Daniel takes time to really think things through. It says in verse 16 that Daniel went to the king and he just asked for time so that he could interpret the dream. He just asked King Nebuchadnezzar, like, hey, give me a minute, give me just a little bit of time to figure this out, and I got you. He doesn't try to rush in and figure things out. He doesn't try to immediately have a solution on the spot. He asks for time so that way he can just figure it out and think things through, as opposed to making some rash decision and just diving headfirst into something. And then the third thing that Daniel does is that he seeks out community and God to consult on the matter. It says in, verses 17 through 18, that he goes to his friends and he asks them to be praying with him to God, for God to reveal the mystery to them, for God to tell them what's going on and what the dream is, what it means, all of that. So he seeks out this community and he seeks out this intentional time of prayer with God because he doesn't want to just, again, rush into something, but he really wants to make sure that he has his whole, circle supporting him and supporting solving this problem, and that he's going to God for answers. He's not trying to come up with his own answers, but he's just right away turning to God and being like, hey, what am I doing? And he's getting people to help him in that, which makes it even more powerful. And then from there, we see that the fourth thing that he does is he continues to pray, and when God reveals the mystery to him, he praises God. So he prays for the answer, and then when God gives him the answer, he praises him. We see in verses 20 through 23 this praise that he gives to God, thanking him and praising God for being who he is and for bestowing wisdom and always delivering and things like that. Really important things to thank God for. So not only does he pray and get the answer, but he praises God and thanks God immediately for that. He doesn't wait until the situation is resolved and all of that to then be like, oh yeah, by the way, thanks God. But he right away, as soon as God gives him the interpretation and the dream and all of that and helps him out, he right away thanks God for it. And he just right away praises him with those verses. And then the last thing that we see that Daniel does is that he gives all the glory to God as he is solving the problem. So he at no point tries to take credit for what has been revealed to him or anything like that. You see when he goes and is talking to King Nebuchadnezzar and he's saying, hey, I know what your dream is and I have the interpretation of it, he at no point claims to have figured it out on his own. He says that it is only God and God alone who is able to do this and is able to figure this out and is able to answer and resolve this. So Daniel gives all the glory to God, and he really gives the whole situation to God. He's just like, all right, God, do your thing and resolve this. Just use me as a vessel for your will. He doesn't try to slide in with his own interpretations or his own plans or his own agendas, but he instead just lets God lead through him. Oh, that's really cool. And so then with all of this, having taken these, 5 steps, what comes of it? What are the results of these steps that Daniel took? Does it work? Is he able to solve the problem? If we finish out chapter 2, we'll find the answer to that. So let's take a look. Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken into pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you domain and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind, and the beasts of the field, and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. For iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things into pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. So here in these verses, we see that Daniel is able to successfully solve the problem and point King Nebuchadnezzar to God, which is like an ultimate bonus in any situation that you're going through. We see that he is able to interpret the dream, which, by the way, if you're interested, the dream, when it's talking about all the different kingdoms and all of that, obviously the gold kingdom is Babylon. The Iron Kingdom is the Roman kingdom, and it being mixed with clay is talking about the struggle between the Romans and the Israelite kingdom at the time. And the rock that breaks all the kingdoms and establishes a new mountain kingdom, that's Jesus. And that's the new kingdom through Jesus and the new covenant through Jesus. And the mountain is cool because you also hear in a lot of the prophet books, you hear about Mount Zion, which is like the future promised land, the new earth where we're going to be restored to, that type of thing. So a little bit of background, but that's kind of what the dream is talking about, which is really cool in and of itself. But so yeah, we see that Daniel is able to successfully interpret this dream in its entirety and give King Nebuchadnezzar the correct meaning and implications of it. We see that he's able to do it through God, and he's able to solve the problem. And then after doing so, King Nebuchadnezzar, he praises Daniel, and he gives Daniel this new power of authority, and he gives his friends more power and authority too. And he praises Daniel and praises God through Daniel, and the problem is solved. Daniel and his friends aren't getting executed anymore, which is great. So, looking at this story, how can we look to how Daniel faced this problem of interpreting King Nebuchadnezzar's dream so he wouldn't die, and apply that to the challenges that we face in our daily lives? And in this, I think that there are 5 clear steps that Daniel takes in order to handle this problem that we can use to handle the challenges that we will face in our daily lives and in each season that we go through. So the first one that we see is that we need to get clarity on the situation. Again, we saw that Daniel just took a deep breath and asked the guard, "Why is this happening?" And he lets the guard explain to him what's going on. So the first thing we should do is we should get clarity. We should get all the information on the situation. I think we, a lot of times, are very quick to react and quick to think, just be like, oh, let me handle this right away. Let me just resolve this right away. Let me just get this out of the way. But a lot of times that leads to us acting in a really rash manner and can lead to some not great outcomes. But if we just stop and get clarity and really make sure we understand what the problem is, what the challenge is, then we'll be better equipped to handle it. I mean, imagine if Daniel hadn't stopped and asked, well, why does King Nebuchadnezzar want to kill all of us? And instead just ran off or tried to kill King Nebuchadnezzar in return or something drastic like that. That would have led to so many more problems and it wouldn't have resolved anything. So get clarity on the situation. Second thing that we should do is that we need to stop and think things through. We see that Daniel, it says that he takes the time to ask King Nebuchadnezzar to just, can I have a minute to figure this out? Can I have some time to think about this? And this again ties in with the clarity one of, you don't want to just dive right into responding to a situation. You don't just want to act super rashly and immediately. It's good to take time and think things through and to really process them. A lot of times if we act in the moment, we'll be acting out of a really emotional place, and that won't always lead to the best results. But if we take time to think, even if it's just overnight, a lot of times when we wake up the next day or a few days later, it doesn't seem as bad as when we first find out about a problem or we're first faced with a challenge. So just take time to stop and think about things. Just breathe. Take a moment to just breathe. And then that leads into the third thing that you need to do in handling new challenges and problems, and that is to pray over the whole situation. We see that Daniel, as soon as he, gets clarity and asks for time to just think about things, he right away goes into prayer. He right away resorts to, let me turn to God and pray about the situation and pray for the wisdom to be able to resolve this situation. He doesn't at any point in the text try to come up with his own solution to the problem, but instead he just right away turns to, let me pray to God and ask God what to do and ask God for the wisdom to resolve this situation. And if we would just do that, if we would all just take the time to pray to God as we are trying to resolve things and handle situations, then we would be able to so much better just handle things. And we wouldn't, instead of having our own really poorly thought out plans, we would be able to execute God's plan, which is always going to be so much better than anything we could come up with. So it's better to pray over the whole situation and get God's wisdom on what to do instead of just relying on your own. The fourth thing that we see that we should do is to get trusted community involved. Daniel didn't just keep this to himself. He didn't just go lock himself in a room and didn't tell anyone what was going on or didn't talk to anyone and just like silently was like, I'll handle it on my own. It says that he went to his friends and he asked them like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what is happening. I need your help in praying about this, in working through this, in resolving this. And that's what we should do. I think a lot of times, I know for me especially, I want to keep things internalized. And I'm like, oh, I can just handle it on my own. I don't want to burden other people. I don't want to bother other people with this problem that I'm facing. But in reality, that's not how we should handle things. We should go to our community. We should go to our friends that we trust and ask them like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm dealing with. Can you please be praying for this with me and just be helping me in handling this? And in doing that, we will able to a lot more effectively resolve a problem if we will just stop thinking we can handle everything on our own and get our trusted community involved. And then the fifth and final thing that we need to do in handling problems that we can learn from Daniel is to give it all over to God. Daniel says repeatedly throughout this text that it's God who gave him the wisdom to interpret the dream, and it's God who's able to do everything. Daniel at no point takes credit for it. Daniel at no point tries to slide in his own agenda. And I think a lot of times we like to just, again, keep situations to ourselves and think like, oh, I can handle this. I can fix this on my own. It's fine. But if we just give it all over to God and just let ourselves be a vessel for God to work through and just let ourselves follow through with God's plan and God's wisdom and God's word and all of that, things will work out so much better than if we just try to handle it all on our own or with our own thoughts or our own way of dealing with things. And so if we just give it all to God, things will work out so much better. And I mean, that's what Daniel did. I mean, again, he was made a ruler in Babylon, which is insane. Because again, like we talked about in the last video, like Babylon didn't really like the Israelites. So if we just give it all to God, we would be able to handle things so much better. And then that pressure is off of us of having to figure it out for ourselves. So we know that we're going to face challenges throughout our entire lives. There's no avoiding it. We are consistently going to be challenged. However, no matter how big the challenge is, it's never too big to overcome. If we just take the time to stop, breathe, think, pray, get help, and let God take over, all of the challenges we will face can be conquered. I mean, it worked for Daniel, and it can work for you too. No challenge is too much for you and God.